There is an element to truth that every time she gets visited, she's looking absolutely fabulous with wonderful makeup. Her hair looks absolutely terrific. The main problem, though, is the script. Jane Goldman condenses a complex book into a convoluted screenplay that is over-reliant on flashbacks, contrived plotting, and stilted expository dialogue. It's painful. So despite the presence of Bill and Daniel, I recommend giving this one a miss.
Okay, well, I appreciate that being read out for balance, and I disagree with almost every single word of it.
Limehouse Golem is at 9, then Detroit's at number 8.
So I thought it was great. I think it's really well directed. I think it revisits an important story and does it in a way that's dramatic and engaging. Great performance by John Boyega, brilliant performance by Will Poulter, and terrifically directed by Catherine Bigelow, who is one of my favourite directors.
I'm not quite sure how to pronounce Vina's surname. I would say Dacent. Okay. D-A-C-E-N-T.
Oh, I think it's Decent.
Okay, Vina Decent. Let's just go for the anglicised version. Vina, thanks for the email. Good doctors. Watched Detroit over the weekend. It shook me to the core. Had no idea this took place 50 years ago. It made the viewing experience more intense. It's no easy watch. You could feel the tension in the air from the first raid. The performances are superb, grounded, nuanced, and unnerving. My heart pounded harder when it came to the situation at the Algiers Hotel. When I couldn't take any more, I wept. Detroit is under my skin and will be staying with me for a while. I feel this will spark debate, as it feels 50 years on, some things have not moved forward. Thank you for the correspondence on that. Number 7 is Despicable Me 3, which I think we've covered
we have.
fully over the years. Annabelle Creation.
No, I don't know because I haven't seen it.
Still at number 6. Logan Lucky is at number 5. Amy Andrews. I'll do this.
Yeah, go on.
Amy Andrews from our Facebook page. Very much enjoyed the redneck charm and grassroots ocean feel in Logan Lucky. A good film that is prevented from being great by 2 glaringly bad performances from Seth MacFarlane, expected, and Hilary Swank, unexpected. Riley Keough continues to impress in everything that she's in. I could watch Channing Tatum, Adam Driver, and Daniel Craig having awkward conversations in southern accents all day long. And Ella Grace Smith, age 13. I am newly converted to your church, having been listening to your fabulous podcast for a few months now. After hearing Mark's review on Logan Lucky or Lucky Logan, me and my mum decided to visit the independent cinema in Ambleside and watch the film on the tiny screen there. I wasn't sure what sort of film to expect from watching the trailer, but I enjoyed it. Now this is a typo, I think, but I think she's actually invented a new word, which really works.
Go on.
Okay, and I'm going to try and use it.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure what sort of film to expect from watching the trailer, but I enjoyed it dramatically.
That is great.
See, that
dramatically, that is brilliant.
Dramatically is obviously fine, but
that's got the hint of drastic in it. Dramatically, that is brilliant.
Thank you, Ella Grace. With an amazing script written by Rebecca Blunt, hilarious scenes, Adam Driver's amazing ability not to smile once throughout the whole film, and Daniel Craig making me want to never eat a boiled egg again. The film was different and extremely enjoyable. Me and my mum spent the rest of the day recalling funny scenes and randomly saying cauliflower.
Holy flower.
Which you have to say.
Holy flower.
Exactly like that. From Mr. Accent over there.
Thank you.
Lucky Logan's at 5. The Emoji Movie's at number 4.
No, I don't care.
Really?
I'm not going to see the Emoji Movie. I'm sorry. You have to draw the line somewhere.
Why? If you'd been here, you'd have seen it. And then
yes, but crucially, I wasn't here.
It's a fair point. The Hitman's Bodyguard is at number 3.
I wasn't here when that came out, but I did go and see it, and I did find that that line in that Elvis Costello song about "you lack lust, you're so lackluster," and that just kept going round my head as I watched this, thinking, it's a film in which it's going, that Samuel Jackson performance that you really like, it's that one, and the thing, and then there's the shooting and swearing, and and about 10 minutes in, it's like, you have now done all of that. That's what you're going to do.
There's a little bit of Eddie Izzard there.
Was it?
Who is on next week's show?
Is he for
Victoria and Abdul?
Which I haven't seen yet, but I'm seeing next week.
Dame Judi Dench and Eddie Izzard will be our guests.
I have seen Mother. Bing! Exclamation mark.
Yes, and Darren Aronofsky is on the way.
And who is?
Darren Aronofsky. You would think Mr. and Mrs. Aronofsky might have had a thought. Do you think they did that on purpose?
I think his middle name is Aaron. No. I think he's Darren Aronofsky.
Number 2 is Dunkirk. I want to read this email from Gareth James. Lovely email. Thank you, Gareth. This could get a bit rambly, good doctor, so I'll try and keep it brief. I first saw Dunkirk at the Electric in Portobello Road in London.
Which is a lovely cinema.
Just an extraordinary evening on so many levels. Having seen my grandfather soon after, I decided to test the waters and see if I could convince him to go to the cinema for the first time since Lincoln.
Okay.
Having explained it wasn't the usual saccharine fare, his interest was piqued. So a week ago or so, my brother and I took him to the Everyman in Chelmsford for an afternoon showing. I should point out that at the time of Dunkirk, he was an evacuee, but he joined the war effort soon after that and is a veteran of Normandy. Wow. For me to watch the film sat next to him was an incredibly emotional and humbling experience. I was fortunate enough to attend the 70th anniversary memorial with him a few years ago, and throughout the film I was reminding myself that the only reason I was sat there was that he had survived that day when his friends either side of him in that churchyard were shot and killed. Such is the randomness of war and the pride I have in his determination to resolutely insist that he is not a hero, but merely one of millions of unfortunate young men thrown into a situation they were not equipped to survive is tremendous. He observed that the film very correctly reflected the loneliness and isolation of those soldiers, and that other films that portrayed the idea of a band of brothers were entirely inaccurate. That said, his biggest criticism was the haircuts, which he said were utterly preposterous.
Okay.
He has a wicked sense of humour. We love him utterly for it. He turns 94 next weekend. He is a legend and a hero to me. So, Gareth, thank you very much indeed. Don't have the name of your grandfather, but you can imagine seeing Dunkirk with a man with that experience next, he's going to transform it. And it never occurred to me that that's absolutely right. There's so many war films do have that band of brothers kind of ethos that run through it, and doubtless that's the experience of many, except for Gareth's granddad, who, just like in Dunkirk, it's a bunch of individuals really just trying to fight for themselves and each other.
I should say that I think it is a testament to the film that somebody who has that knowledge and that experience can watch it and their only complaint is their haircuts. Yes. I mean, I think that if I was Christopher Nolan, I would take that as the biggest possible compliment.
Yeah, I like the fact that the haircuts are not, that they are preposterous. The haircuts.
Well, as the owner of a preposterous haircut, exactly. I think that's fine.
Gareth, thanks very much for the email. Dunkirk's at 2.
A dramatically preposterous haircut.
Very good. And American Made is number 1.
I mean, American Made is utterly frivolous. And it's fun whilst it's on. It reminds me of a lot of other films, you know, like Air America. And it's a film that's built entirely around that kind of star wattage persona of Tom Cruise doing the smiley sunglasses, crazy flyer, follow me, come with me on this adventure. It's inspired by a real story, although it obviously, you know, takes great liberties with whatever the truth of that story may be. It is fun. It is fun. I'm surprised. Is this now its second week at number 1?
Yes, well, it's second week in the chart. Yeah, second week at number 1. But I mean, Dunkirk, which has grossed 53 million.
Right.
I know, so Christopher Nolan was talking about, you know, trying to get a British film made on a Hollywood
budget,
but that's a hit.
Yes, that's a whopping hit. There's no question that's a whopping hit. So, but American Made, I think, for the second. I mean, it's enjoyable while it's on screen. It is largely unmemorable beyond that.
That's the top 10. Time to review something, Mark.
Goon, Last of the Enforcers. You remember some while ago there was a film called Goon. Sean William Scott as Doug Glatt. Who's this kind of, you know, not intellectually brilliant character who's a bouncer who winds up playing ice hockey because it's discovered that the thing that he can really do is beat people up, and beating people up on the ice is I don't watch hockey. I don't really know much about hockey at all. But the film was eye-opening only in as much as it seemed to say that ice hockey is basically rollerball on ice. And there are just large sections in which people just take their helmets off and just beat each other up, and everybody else just stands around while they just beat each other up. Okay, fine. I can't remember anyone asking for a sequel. Never mind. Here it is. Lives have moved on. He's got older. He's got weaker.
What's it called? Goon?
Last of the Enforcers. Because the Enforcer bit is the bit about you are the person who does the beaty uppy bit while everybody else is doing the hitty pucky bit. Okay. Puck? Is it a hockey puck?
Yes.
Yes.
Sounds about right.
Hitty thing. Yeah, fine. There's a joke about that, incidentally. There's the funniest joke in the... Oh, I'll tell you about it in a minute. Anyway, so he's had one too many injuries. His partner is pregnant. He's going to be a father. So he has to step away from the fighty ice hockey and get a job working in an insurance company. Although the fact is, he's still really doing the fighty ice hockey.
So how was your first day?
Work? It was so fun. Yeah, I mean, there was so many documents and phone calls to make and receive, and you sit a lot. I mean, like, pretty much the whole day. You know, so it's safe. It's really safe. Plus, there's a Harvey's close by, which is good.
Hey, I'm proud of you, of us. We're doing this. It's a lot, and it's crazy, but we're doing it together.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So, you know, it has that kind of sentimentality thing. It also has sort of fairly crass humour. And what it has an awful lot of is people on the ice literally beating seven bells out of each other in slow motion, you know, explosive punching, you know,
Kapow.
kapow, kaping, kapow, kasmash, beating people up. So the funniest joke in the film is this. The sort of creepy guy who owns the hockey team is telling his son that he's got to, you know, he's going to stand up and take the family business. And he says, son, the whole world is watching. And the kid goes, well, Canada's watching, and, you know, maybe a couple of states, which is a joke about the fact that most people aren't tuned into this sport. And I did feel watching it that maybe it's that I'm just not particularly tuned into this particular sport and the beating people up on ice. I'm sure there is more to the sport than thumping people in the face on the ice, but not as far as this is concerned. Lee Schreiber is quite funny as this character who, you know, was once a hockey hero, now earns money street fighting on ice. Literally, they've taken away the game. He is just doing the equivalent of backstreet brawling. There's some sub-Ron Burgundy stuff. T.J. Miller is this kind of idiot brain foul-mouthed sportscaster, and he is very, very sort of sub-Ron Burgundy. But it is one of those films in which I felt once was enough. Second time round, there's a couple because there are some fairly talented people on screen. But I do end up watching it just thinking it's not funny enough to justify its existence. And a film in which there actually is a joke about the fact that no one watches this sport outside of Canada and possibly a couple of states is kind of telling you what you need to know.
Do you want to do something else?
Wind River, written and directed by Taylor Sheridan, who wrote Sicario and Hell or High Water, and has described this.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, you know, absolutely. And described this as being a third part of a trilogy that explores the modern American frontier. So basically, the story is Wyoming, incidentally, which is interesting. I thought that you had teed that up on purpose, because that.
Yes, obviously.
You did that on purpose. That's why.
Speaking of Wyoming.
So it's a very, very chilly and deliberately cold story. It begins with the snowbound death of a young woman. And this brings together two mismatched outsiders. Jeremy Renner plays this grieving tracker, Corey Lambert, who is wrestling with his own personal demons. Elizabeth Olsen is the FBI agent, Jane Banner, who is brought in from sunnier climes to investigate the crime, because they're on Native American reservation, and so there's a lot of stuff about who actually has jurisdiction here and who actually is in control. She's brought in completely from the wrong place, completely fish out of water, and completely inappropriately attired for the freezing hell which awaits.
By yourself?
Yeah, it's just me.
No, Ben Shoaib. I'm the tribal police chief. That's Corey Lambert with Fish and Wildlife. He's the one who found the body. And this is his father-in-law, Dan. You don't do nothing.
We got the same job, eh?
Well, I'm sorry to meet under these circumstances. So do you want to show me the body? I don't mean to be rude, I'm just freezing my ass off here, so the quicker the better.
Yeah? Well, that's going to get a lot worse if you go out there dressed like that.
The body's 5 miles on snowmobile. I'm afraid you'd be dead by the time we got there.
I got the call when I was at a weapons course in Riverton, so this is what I've got.
Well, you should have a winter gear bag in that truck.
Well, no, that's not a government vehicle, it's a rental. I flew in from Vegas, so I'm just the closest agent to the scene. You don't think I can make it?
Oh, you're from Vegas?
No, I'm not from Vegas. I'm stationed there. I am from Fort Lauderdale. I'm sorry. If we're gonna keep having this conversation,
Let's get you fixed up inside. It's gonna be great.
Thanks.
You can hear from that clip, I mean, you can hear the wind, you can hear the chill, you can hear the cold that gets right through into the bones, and everybody thinks that she's completely out of water. What then happens is that she wants to make a case for this being a homicide, but in order to do that, for various kind of jurisdictional reasons, she needs a tracker, so she needs to team up with Jeremy Renner's character, and who's from the Fisheries and Wildlife Department, and together they go on the trail of this murder, trying to understand how it's happened. And it's something which chimes with his own personal tragedy. And during the course of it, you see her character go from being a sort of very sharp, plucky, but basically innocent outsider, starting to understand what this world is and what this world is about. So the film has, you know, a mystery plot and a mystery story, but so much of it is about the background. It is about the environment that it takes place in. The writer-director has described it as being about a land, people being forced to live on a land where people were not meant to live. And this is described as a land of snow and silence. And it's a film which has a great sympathy for these characters who are sort of being pushed to the edges of society, and also a kind of great awareness of what that has done, what kind of world that has created for them. It's got a really, really strong sense of place and a really strong sense of atmosphere, and it's very well cast for Jeremy Renner, who is somebody who does all those, emotions on the inside. He's not somebody who does big, he looks sometimes very, very placid, but you get the sense that there's a lot more going on behind it. He's very well cast. I think it's one of his best roles. It reminded me, oddly enough, of a very, very different film called Mystery Road, the Ivan Sen film, which is set in the outback. And, so from frozen Wyoming to this kind of, this sort of scorching heat. And that's the story of, here we have this a tracker caught between two worlds and, being on the one hand part of the indigenous community, but also outside it, and that community being at the sharp end of violent crime and trying to unravel all the different threads. And so much of that, again, is to do with the mosaic of the world that it comes from. And although I said one of these is snowbound, the other is the most different kind of desert environment, they both still have that Western feel about them, that kind of frontiers feel, and they both have this lingering sense of melancholy, of sadness, of underlying tragedy. I think it's a very powerful film. I'm not sure that it's absolutely, I've seen some reviews which think it is really, really brilliant. And interestingly enough, the person whom I sat next to who really didn't like Mother really, really loves Wind River, and I really liked it. But I think it gains weight from being part of this kind of loose trilogy of stories. And what I like about it is it's not so much the murder mystery story, it's the environment, it's the atmosphere. There are things about the story that I'm unconvinced by, and there are things about the conclusion of the story that don't quite work for me. But in terms of setting us up in that world, this chilly, cold world in which somebody is sort of clawing away at the snow and coming to an awful realization about what's, the iciness that lies underneath that. I think it does that very effectively.
It's Kermit and Mayer's film review at the weekend. More of Mark's reviews, plus my conversation with Darren Aronofsky, coming up after the latest 5 Live news.
More live Premier League football than anyone else. This is BBC 5 Live.
Some of the headlines, I'm Lisa McCormick. People in Florida are being told it's no longer safe to travel by road as part of the state are hit by high winds ahead of the arrival of Hurricane Irma. A quarter of the total population have been ordered to leave their homes. The governor is warning that the storm surges could be as high as some houses. The Manchester Arena is reopened this evening, almost 4 months after a suicide bomb attack which killed 22 people. A charity gig's taking place, headlined by Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds. All of the proceeds will go towards a permanent memorial for the victims. Rescuers are continuing to search for survivors in Mexico after Thursday's earthquake. At least 60 people are known to have died, 200 were injured and thousands have lost their homes. And HSBC has said sorry to thousands of businesses after closing their accounts, some say without notice. It's after they failed to respond to the bank when it got in touch asking for information about payments made overseas. Time for the sport now, here's Dawn Busby.
Joe Root has made it 2 series wins from 2 after England defeated the West Indies at Lord's to take the series 2-1. Next up for England then the Australians. So is head coach Trevor Bayliss giving any selection hints away?
There's obviously 2 or 3 positions that I'm sure will take more time than the others. I can't see us going out of outside of people or someone that we've played in the last 12 to 18 months. I'm sure it'll come from that group.
In the Premier League, Arsenal are back to winning ways. 3-0 victory today over Bournemouth, and Arsene Wenger, the manager, says he's impressed with his team.
By keeping the same urgency level in the team and the same focus and the same discipline. I believe that, as you just mentioned it, we are a team who likes to play football, but we have not to forget as well that it's about discipline and sometimes the desire to go forward, we forget our defensive discipline.
Manchester City beat Liverpool 5-0 in the early kick-off, a performance that manager Jurgen Klopp says his team must learn from.
The result is awful for us and for City, fantastic. But we have to learn from the performance and not from the results. So the result at the end, I know it's probably historical and we will read it in books in 500 years. I don't like it. But, but maybe for the moment we can ignore the result, take the lesson and learn of it.
Brighton recorded their first win in the top flight for 34 years, beating West Brom. Tottenham won 3-0 at Everton. Chelsea defeated Leicester 2-1 and Watford beat Southampton 2-0. Stoke held Manchester United to a 2-2 draw at home. And in the Scottish Premiership, Aberdeen saw a 1-1 draw at Hearts. Chris Froome has described today's stage of the Vuelta a España as the hardest of any Grand Tour he's done. Froome is on the verge of capturing the first Vuelta Tour double since 1978. After finishing third, Alberto Contador won today's stage.
It was brutal up there, absolutely brutal. I mean, the conditions today were pretty rough. Wind was howling. We could see Contador just ahead of us and we knew he was running out of steam, so we did everything we could to try and catch him, but Contador was just too strong for us. But what a way to end his career. To finish with a stage win on top of Angliru like that is an amazing way for him to go out.
Jamie Murray and Martina Hingis have added the US Open title to their Wimbledon mixed doubles crown. Meanwhile, Madison Keys and Sloane Stephens are preparing to meet in the first All-American women's final at the US Open in 15 years, and Russell Fuller is there.
And they're also the first Americans not named Williams to reach a Grand Slam final since Lindsay Davenport was in the Wimbledon final of 2005. Madison Keys has the biggest serve. She's the 15th seed. She's served a tournament-leading 34 aces. Sloane Stephens, great defence, great speed across the court, and she's hoping to become only the 5th player in the Open era to win a Grand Slam as an unseeded player. And there's been some real drama in the wheelchair singles semi-final just concluded. All British match, Alfie Hewitt saving 6 match points and converting his 5th to beat Gordon Reid 10-8 in a third set tiebreak. The match lasted over 3 hours.
Thank you, Russell. In Rugby Union's Premiership, Bath beat European champions Saracens 31-21. Exeter defeated London Irish 37-7, and Harlequins were 28-17 winners over Gloucester. Just finally for now, Northampton had perhaps one of the biggest wins of the day, beating local rivals Leicester 24-11. And finally, in the Pro 14, Glasgow were winners also. They beat Ospreys 31-10.
First for news and the best live sport. This is BBC 5 Live.
Welcome back to the weekend edit of Kermode and Mayo's film review on BBC Radio 5 Live.
Still to come, more reviews of the week's new films, but remember not to text as this is a recorded show.
Mother, starring Jennifer Lawrence, is out next week, and my conversation with the film's writer and director, Darren Aronofsky, follows this clip.
You know, you're not going to be so young forever. Have kids. Then you'll be creating something together. That's what keeps the marriage going. This is all just setting. Oh, you do want them.
That's a clip from Mother, the new movie from Darren Aronofsky. He's the writer and director, and he's with us here. Hello, Darren. How are you, sir?
Thank you. It's nice to be back, Simon.
Thank you for coming back. Last time you were in was for Noah.
Yes.
Which is 2014.
If you say so.
Yeah, I believe it's 2014. And there you had, for that, you had some source material.
Yeah.
The Bible has been there for a while. True. Where this is a slightly different territory. Take us back to the origins of this story and how long it's taken you to write.
Well, it's a very unique process, this one. It was a completely different way. And I've just been consistently trying to push myself to work in different ways. I think it just makes you kind of rediscover the job a little bit. Normally, films take years. Like Black Swan took 10 years of development from the first time I met with Natalie Portman. Noah was an idea for 20 years. But this one really happened in this kind of 5-day period when I just had this idea and it was sort of like a fever. I stayed awake for 5 days alone in my house, just banging at the typewriter. And At the end of it, I showed it to a few trusted people, and they were like, "Oh, there's something here. We should work with it." And so, I mean, that was literally 2 years ago that I did that 5-day span. Then I attached Jennifer Lawrence, and suddenly you have a movie when you have Jennifer Lawrence. And then a year later we were shooting, and it's been a very, very long post. It's been about a 52-week post, and we premiered in Venice yesterday.
Yeah. And what did they make of it?
It was intense. You know, I always knew it was kind of a hand grenade into pop culture. It was going to be explosive, and I think my films, people generally know that there's a love it or hate it or not get it. Or,
it was reported as, you know, wild applause and some boos.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. That was the first press thing at 8 o'clock in the morning. Please do not see my movie at 8 o'clock in the morning. It is not for it. Every other press screening, the 2 after that, there was only applause. So, you know, they just love to promote that, the controversy, but I'm actually okay with it. And, you know, even now there's 5-star reviews in The Guardian, and then there's not such stronger reviews in other places. So
you kind of expect that, don't you? I mean, when you make such a strong, visceral film as this, some people aren't going to like it and other people will love it.
Yes, and I think it's funny because it's the same people who complain that, you know, every film is exactly the same and they're all boring and they're all formula. The second you do something weird, they go, whoa, hold on. Where's my 3-act structure? And this film was always designed to be something new for audiences and something unexpected.
Yeah, and I just on that 5-day splurge that you had,
fever dream, I like to call it.
Yeah, I mean, well, maybe that sort of transmitted itself into the movie because the movie has that kind of a feel. You know, we're trapped in there with you in your fever dream.
Well, I've always been jealous of singer-songwriters who, you know, you hear these stories about Bob Dylan writing a song in the afternoon that becomes, you know, an anthem for a generation. As filmmakers, you know, it's a 2-3 year process to communicate to an audience. And I always wondered what it would be like to try to capture one emotion, one feeling, one moment in time, and just try to crystallize it and then try to turn that into a movie. So I think it has that feeling. It's a very direct line. It's, you know, it's kind of, normally I talk about roller coasters describing my films. This is really just truly the first hill of a roller coaster, which is a long, slow climb, and then just a complete plummet into the concrete.
A descent.
Yeah.
Yes. Some listeners' questions before we finish. Matt Owen says, you famously once said, Darren, the film isn't done until you cut your favorite shot. Can you give us some examples of the shots that you've cut and explain why? I mean, maybe with reference to Mother. Is that true in this film?
You know, that is a quote of mine, and I'm trying to think if there was anything I lost that. It was a strange edit, and it was a strange design because the film is so linear. Normally, when you're cutting a film, you're like, oh, I can pull this scene out and put it 3 scenes earlier, and it actually has an interesting effect that I didn't realize. Kind of like when you're on a word processor moving around ideas in an essay, you can do that and have different effects. This film was so linear in everything from performance to makeup to hair that nothing was shifted. And in fact, if you lose something, you know, it's funny because last night at Venice, no one left their seats, which was amazing. I've never seen that. But we did a screening earlier in New York, and, you know, a few people went to the bathroom. It wasn't as much of a cinephile crowd. And what I realized is, while watching them leave, I'm like, oh, if they don't see this, they're not going to. And every sort of moment in the film is actually either planting a red herring or planting a seed that you need to know for the future. And if you don't see it, it's just not going to make as much sense.
So even though the quote is accurate, it didn't apply to this film?
Yeah, I'm going to have to, we'll talk about it next time I see you in the next film, because it's actually, I want to call can I get a lifeline? Like, I call my editor?
Yeah, I think it's the kind of question you have to think about. Darren, we appreciate you speaking to us. I think the moral of the film is, if Ed Harris comes knocking, just don't answer the door.
You'll never answer the door again.
Darren Aronofsky, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Simon.
What is new? Let's see what we can fit in.
Let's do The Vault. Cross-generic thriller horror co-written and directed by Dan Bush. Group of robbers decide to hold up a bank, right?
This isn't going
when
well.
they get there, there's not as much money as they thought. But then, as if from nowhere, James Franco is one of the people that they have taken hostage, and he suddenly leaps in.
At 5:20, all transactions need to be reconciled and synced with the database. We need to verify the cash, lock all the drawers in the safe, and the manager needs to type his PIN. If that doesn't happen, the alarm is triggered at exactly 5:20. Now, the manager can do it, or me.
Take the bag off. Where are you?
I can help you.
And the way you can help them is by telling them, showing them down into the basement where there is the vault. Now, at the beginning of the movie, we hear, oh, it's great that you want to work here in this bank. Of course, don't be troubled by those stories of hauntings that people keep repeating. James Franco clearly had a couple of days free in which he did all of his scenes. The thing with this...
Sounds a bit like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Actually, now you say it, here's the problem with it is, in the past few weeks, we've reviewed a few films that, you know, that didn't have such a huge theatrical life. I mean, things like, you know, The Cell, which I thought was better than some people. A lot of people really didn't like it at all. Bushwick, a couple of weeks ago. I mean, you know, headed for the small screen, although I thought it had a couple of interesting ideas, you know, in it. Not great. The case of this, I was literally watching it, and I could feel separate parts of my body falling asleep as they just went, oh, it's that film, it's that film, and they're going to do that, and then there's that film. Thank you very much. And I was trying really hard to think, you know, what would this be like if I was watching it on a small screen and I was, you know, it's late Channel 5, 9 o'clock or whatever, you know, that kind of, what used to be straight to video movies, because it's a straight to video. It doesn't matter what decade, what century we're in, it's a straight to video movie. And I just thought it was fantastically boring. Totally predictable. Franco literally looking like he was phoning the performance in, and then moving from one genre to another in a way that was just like, yeah, I know exactly where this is going. I don't care. I don't believe in any of these people. I don't care about the story. I'm not bothered by any of the stuff that's happening that's meant to be shocking. I'm not gripped by any of the stuff that's meant to be gripping. And anyway, it was very, 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 very boring. And then something shocking did happen, which is I came out and I looked it up on the internet, and it turns out it isn't out on DVD until October the 9th. I fully assumed that it would be out on DVD like tomorrow, but that's the most shocking thing about it. The Vault. Sleep through it.
It does sound as though the caretaker might have been, you know, it was the guy from down the road who is in the vault.
He would have got away with it too, hadn't he, you pesky critics.
Is there an Egyptian mummy at any stage?
You know, there might have been, but I think I was asleep. I mean, I could literally feel my legs gone, my knees going, oh, my arms falling asleep. You know, my head. It was, yeah.
That's an age thing. You've got circulation problems.
Yeah, well, believe me, the vault wasn't helping.
What else do we have to see?
Okay, so Insiriated, which is also known as In Laban and In Syria, I think was the title that it had in America. French-Belgian production, directed by cinematographer turned director Philippe Van Leeuw. Basically set in a building in Damascus, an apartment building in Damascus, in which a family and a group of people are trapped in by the sniper fire of civil war. The film takes place over a very sort of confined time period, and in the background we have the sound of helicopters, mortars, snipers, sirens, a constant background drone. The apartment is ruled over by this sort of matriarch figure played by Hem Abbas, who is really brilliant. And in the apartment are her family, her father-in-law, her daughters, her son, her daughter's boyfriend, the maid, and a couple who have a young baby. The couple are planning on leaving, on getting out that night, and the husband goes out to go and meet his contact. There's a line in it which is, it's hard to leave what we've started here, which really reminded me of that documentary, Syrian Love Story. But as he makes his way across the streets, tragedy strikes, and what then happens is that the tragedy is seen by the maid, Delanin, and she's horrified, and she wants to say something about it, but the sort of matriarch figure says, no, you have to keep it to yourself. And this brings a sort of deception into the group. So on the outside there is war raging, and on the inside there is deception and distrust. Then there's a knock at the door, and it starts to turn into something resembling a home invasion movie that has moments in it of pure horror. One particular distressing scene, which I think is actually handled very well in terms of dealing with what it's dealing with, but it was really, really genuinely harrowing. At times, I was reminded of that brilliant drama in a totally different setting, but that film Under the Shadow, which similarly was about a mother and a daughter in an apartment in which there's a mortar shell has come through the roof, but there's something else in the apartment. And this is a story in which there is a ghost in this house. There is literally a ghost in this house, metaphorically a ghost in this house, that somehow is bringing the outside inside. It's a tough watch. It's not an easy film to watch. It's very tense. It's very grueling, shot with claustrophobic kind of handheld urgency, and straying occasionally into, as I said, queasy kind of horror. Great performances. The film itself, I think, has a few missteps. I think that there are moments in which it tips slightly into something that approaches melodrama, which is referenced, I think, a little bit by the score, which at first has this kind of almost ECG feel about it, this like a tense thing, but then at other moments moves into something which feels rather more kind of melodramatically constructed. But it was very gripping, and it was a film in which you really cared about the people and you really cared about what was happening to them. And as I said, it has moments in it. It's funny, we were talking about it before as being a coming-of-age movie with horror elements. I mean, this is a sort of social realist story with elements, again, taken from horror, but for to very different purposes. Over here, as I said, it is called Inseriated. I'm not sure that title entirely works.
No.
Because when I said it to you, you said, what, as in incinerate?
Yes.
You know,
So is it a joke, or is it?
It is an odd title, which doesn't really, I think, capture the film itself.
What else we got?
Okay, The Work. So this is a documentary set within the walls of Folsom State Prison, as in
Johnny Cash.
As in, yeah, exactly. And it's a documentary which follows a group through a 4-day group therapy event in which inmates and outsiders are brought together to confront their inner demons. So basically, a group of outsiders are brought in to share therapy with, they're referred to as level 4 convicts. These are people who have done very, very bad things, and they're serving long sentences. And one of them at the beginning actually describes one of his crimes. It's really quite hair-raising stuff. But the therapy is like group sessions in which what they're attempting to do is to dig down and get in touch with their emotions. Now, as far as the prisoners are concerned, the big thing, many of them are sort of very bulked up, very sort of physically imposing characters. And we are told that they're all from these different gangs within the prison who have agreed to put aside their differences for these therapy sessions. And the gangs are often sort of divided on racial lines. One character is an ex-member of the Aryan Brotherhood, and so there's all that stuff going on. But they put all that stuff aside because what they're trying to confront is the idea that when they're in prison, they're not allowed to show emotion, they're not allowed to show fear, they're not allowed to show sadness, they're not allowed to cry. And that part of the documentary is very interesting. What's slightly odder is the people from the outside who come in with their own agendas. So, for example, you have one character who's, one person who's, very sort of open and gentle and clearly just has stuff that he wants to deal with. You have another person who's very, very judgmental and seems on the brink of anger, and says very clearly, I am judging all of you as this goes on. And another one who says, I've been to these things before, I don't believe in all this crying nonsense. And what happens during the course of the documentary, which is, we see each one of them break down and cry, and it's to do with those moments in which get down, reach inside, find that fundamental quality. And the themes that come up again and again are very, very similar, to do with things that happen in their childhood, to do with anger with their fathers or the absence of their fathers, to do with some perceived slight that they have had that has been eating away at them, somebody who's terrified of not being respected, people who've been put down by particularly their dads in the past, which actually, oddly enough, makes it chime rather well this week with some of the themes of It. As I was saying that thing before about one of the most moving scenes in it is when you see the bully being bullied by his own father. Exactly how you respond to this will depend to some extent on how you feel about group therapy. The thing that's clearly true is that this therapy, as far as the prison is concerned, is something that is working. There are statistics at the end that say that these things have been very, very productive for the inmates, and it is, as I said, this sort of constant stream of people being brought to an emotional point, which often represents itself physically. I mean, they have to be restrained, they're shouting, they're screaming, they're really sort of wrestling with their inner emotions. The stranger thing is the outsiders and exactly what they're getting out of it and exactly what's been brought in for them. So it's it's odd. It was at times it reminded me of, I mean, I don't say this like, but sometimes it reminded me of some of the men's group meetings that would happen in the 1980s at universities. At times it reminded me of Instant Enlightenment, including VAT. But it's very powerful, it's very raw, it's very visceral, and how you react to it will depend on how you respond to those kind of ideas of group therapy and getting down to that childhood anguish and expressing it.
What else do we have to see?
So, It. The new version of It is out. So, Stephen King's Doorstopper, famously turned into was made for television. Tom was directed, and of course starring as Pennywise the clown.
The dancing clown.
Pennywise the dancing clown. Tim Curry. Hiya, Georgie.
There you go. And that is actually
quite a good Tim Curry, isn't it?
It is very good.
And this is something which is very close to our hearts, because both you and I over the years have discussed things which get under people's skin. And one of them is, the idea of scary clowns.
Coulrophobia.
And of course, the classic scary clown is the scary clown in It, as played by Tim Curry in that miniseries. I mean, the miniseries itself is a little bit that TV version is a little bit up and down, but Tim Curry never puts a clown foot wrong. And that very first sequence in which you see, hiya, Georgie, when he's hiding in the storm drain is really, really properly creepy. So, here we are again with that story. Again, the opening sequence, which is poor young Georgie being lured into the storm drain by terrifying Pennywise the dancing clown.
55.
This time played by Bill Skarsgård, stepping into those enormous shoes of Tim Curry. The action is set in the late 1980s, moved from the 50s of the novel. And by the time the summer rolls around, more kids are starting to go missing. We have a group of misfits who sort of self-define as the losers, who are all variously being haunted by visions which tap into their deepest personal fears. Here's a clip.
My grandfather thinks this town is cursed. He says that all the bad things that happen in this town are because of one thing, an evil thing that feeds off the people of Derry. But it can't be one thing. We all saw something different. Maybe. Or maybe it knows what scares us most, and that's what we see.
I saw a leper. He was like a walking infection.
But you didn't. Because it isn't real. None of this is. None of this makes any sense. They're all like bad dreams. I don't think so. I know the difference between a bad dream and real life, okay? We're all afraid of something.
Got that right. Why, Rich? What are you afraid of? Clowns.
Hiya, Georgie.
I praised your this particular impression.
Stop doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically they come to the conclusion that there is a single entity that is somehow sort of shape-shifting and representing all the different fears, and it is cursing the town of Derry, Maine. And they go hunting for it, a hunt which takes them through woods, through into the sewers, very much like Stand By Me, which obviously is based on The Body, which is a Stephen King story from that collection, Different Seasons collection, which also I think includes Shawshank Redemption and Apt Pupil, doesn't it? And then to a house that looks like it was left over from the shoot of Psycho. And whilst this is going on, they pass a cinema which is showing Batman Lethal Weapon 2 and significantly A Nightmare on Elm Street 5. In the kids' bedrooms, we have posters for Gremlins and Beetlejuice on the wall. So this is very much a cine-literate universe that this film is living in. The film inhabits a world of movies, and it will obviously chime to some extent with people who've been watching Stranger Things and tapping into that kind of weird nostalgia. Funnily enough, the two things that it reminded me of most are The Goonies and Poltergeist. It's very, very similar in tone to The Goonies and Poltergeist. It's directed by Andre Muschietti, who made Mama. And the thing that really drives the film is that he has a clear and very tangible affection for the kids. The kids are all on this sort of cusp. It's going to be a coming-of-age story. They're all individually, racked with fears and guilts and phobias, and they're all having to sort of face it, which is a sort of classic coming-of-age story. And he clearly likes them very much, and you can feel that energy of him liking those characters, and that gives the film this sort of driving power. One of the things people keep saying is it scary? Well, what it is, it's a horror adventure. And when I say Goonies and Poltergeist, I mean, particularly in the case of Poltergeist, Poltergeist is very much a sort of, Spielbergian fantasia, which absolutely has horrifying things in it, but it has that sort of, adventure feel. This, with the scenes of kids on bicycles, scenes of kids having a rock fight, the outdoor stuff, which weirdly at some points also reminded me of things like Kings of Summer. It is as much a coming-of-age tale and as much a story about those friendships and about those, the kind of misfits finding each other, as it is about archetypal mythological horror, in which it sort of manifests most clearly in the form of Pennywise, who I have to say is rather brilliantly played by Bill Skarsgård. I mean, what he manages to do is, whereas the difference with this version is that this particular Pennywise has got this very, almost like a kind of babyish head, almost like a sort of big malevolent baby head, and these kind of Bugs Bunny teeth, and speaks with this lilting, broken chime kind of voice. And the score all the way through goes between kind of nursery rhyme, nursery crime themes that are reminiscent once again of, 1, 2, Freddy's Coming For You from Nightmare on Elm Street. And these sort of lush orchestral themes, which are very, very much like John Williams, and give you that sense of, adventure, of the widening horizons of youth. Benjamin Wallfish did the score, and I think he's done a really, really good job of getting to the emotional core of the story. The other thing that it does, I thought rather well, slightly thumbnail, but I thought it does it well, is it addresses that Stephen King theme, which is that these things are all passed down through generations. So you get the bully, the character who's the bully in the town, who's the leader of the bully gang, and he's horrible. He's absolutely horrible. And yet the most powerful scene is when you see him being bullied by his father, and you realize that all of this stuff is coming down from generation to generation, which is absolutely a theme which has gone through Stephen King. When you look at other King adaptations, it's, as I said, weirdly enough, this is closer to Nightmare on Elm Street and Poltergeist than it is, for example, to The Shining, which everybody always holds up as, the great Stephen King adaptation of The Shining. And of course, King was always very, very uncertain about that version of The Shining. And The Shining is really a Stanley Kubrick movie. I remember there was a phrase that somebody used once. When I used to write for Fangoria, sorry, I know I mention that all the time, but the phrase that they used was, if The Shining was a film for people who don't like Stephen King, The Dead Zone is a film for people who don't like Stephen King or David Cronenberg. And this is absolutely a film for people who like Poltergeist, who like The Goonies, who like Stand By Me, who like all of those kind of youthful adventure stories, but told with this kind of, this very sort of firm streak of horror, with a great inflection of Freddy Krueger and Nightmare on Elm Street. Personally, I could have had it being a little bit more scary, but I really enjoyed it. I really liked its spirit. It's only the early part of the story. We still have the adult part of the story to do. This is chapter 1, so, we have more to come, hopefully. That's happening. And on the strength of how enthusiastic people seem to be about seeing this new version, I have no doubt that is happening.
This has been a Something Else production for BBC Radio 5 Live. Thank you for listening. Back next Friday at 2 with special guests Dame Judi Dench and Eddie Izzard.
It is the final Grand Slam of the year, and on its way, the US Open Women's Final, live from Flushing Meadows in New York. And as I look out of our commentary box down onto the Arthur Ashe Stadium, the opening ceremony is underway. The spectators are in their seats. What they're about to witness, the first All-American final at the US Open in 15 years. Madison Keys against Sloane Stephens. America's future has arrived, and we have every ball on its way here on 5 Live.
First for news and more live Premier League football than anyone else. This is BBC 5 Live.
It is 9 o'clock Saturday night. I'm Gigi Salmon, live in New York, where we're about to bring you commentary on the Women's US Open Final. If you go to the 5 Live website, you can download the Aggers and Vaughan podcast reviewing England's 9-wicket win over the West Indies at Lord's, which includes plenty from Henry Blofeld after he commentated on his last Test match. You can watch his farewell on the BBC Sport website and app.
This is BBC 5 Live.
But first, the BBC News with Lisa McCormick.
500 troops have been sent to the Caribbean to help authorities in the British Virgin Islands and Anguilla cope with the aftermath of Hurricane Irma. The Defence Secretary, Sir Michael Fallon, spoke after chairing a meeting of the government's emergency committee, COBRA.
There have been unconfirmed reports of looting, and we want to make sure the islands are as secure as possible. The troops are already there, but they will be backed up as quickly as possible by additional police who will be flying out on aircraft tomorrow.
The storms en route to Florida was expected to hit the Keys in the morning before moving across to the southwest. More than 6 million people were told to leave their homes. The state's governor is now warning them that if they haven't left, it's too late to travel by road. Rescue teams in southern Mexico are using heavy machinery to search for survivors of a powerful earthquake which killed at least 60 people. Thousands of families have lost their homes after buildings collapsed there. A 12-year-old boy has died after falling through the roof of a derelict factory in Derby. He'd been playing with his friends at the Ada Bliss building when the accident happened. Thousands of anti-Brexit demonstrators have marched through London to demand that Britain stays in the European Union. It's ahead of Monday's first vote on the draft bill, which will turn EU regulations into UK law. And the Manchester Arena's reopened this evening for the first time since a suicide bomber killed 22 people after the Ariana Grande concert in May.
We won't take defeat, and we don't want your pity, because this is the place where we stand strong together with a smile on our face. Mancunians forever, because this is the place in our hearts, in our homes, because this is the place that's a part of our bones.
That's the poet Tony Walsh, who opened the gig with a rendition of This Is the Place. He'd read the poem during a vigil a day after the blast. Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds is the headline act, with all of the money made tonight going towards a permanent memorial for victims of the attack.
5 Live Breakfast.
On 5 Live Breakfast this week, our World Affairs editor John Simpson answered listeners' questions on North Korea.
My question is about the population of North Korea. Do you think that they are kept under control?
It's an unforgiving and very nasty regime. It's probably the nastiest regime on earth.
And we celebrated the career of John Motson, who is retiring from football commentary after 50 years.
My commentary career started when the Bobby Moore, George Best, Bobby Charlton era was just ending. In the time I've been in the commentary box, best player Paul Gascoigne.
You can catch up using the BBC iPlayer radio app.
5 Live Breakfast. Back Monday morning from 6. Coming to you live from New York City.
I'll tell you what, there are 23,000 people in this stadium. There's not one person sitting down.
This is the U.S. Open.
Welcome to Broadway, everybody.
Oh! This place erupts!
You are kidding me.
This is actually incredible. Every single person is on their feet applauding.
From Flushing Meadows.
We're nearly ready to go, under the lights, prime time at the US Open.
On BBC Radio 5 Live.
The Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York, the largest tennis stadium in the world, 23,000 when full. And today, a largely American crowd will get to watch a first All-American women's final here at Flushing Meadows for 15 years. And there is not a Williams sister in sight. Serena Williams, currently on maternity leave, has tweeted her support for the 15th seed Madison Keys against world number 83 Sloane Stephens. 2 people in their first Grand Slam final, and 2 people who've been sidelined through injury for large parts of the year. The tennis is not too far off, with commentary on the way. Hello and welcome. It's lovely to have your company. The opening ceremony ahead of the women's final is underway. Local time, it is 4 minutes past 4 in the afternoon. The sun is shining. The roof, therefore, is open. There are a couple of white, fluffy clouds in the sky, and conditions are perfect. I would say the tennis is around 10 to 15 minutes away. And alongside me in the 5 Live commentary box that's high up, it's almost in the gods of the Arthur Ashe Stadium, looking down onto the court, we have former ATP player Jeff Tarango, tennis correspondent Russell.
thirst for news and more live Premier League football than anyone else. This is BBC 5 Live.
It's 2 o'clock on 5 Live. This is Mark Kermode and Simon Mayo.
The top news story on 5 Live this hour. Wayne Rooney is charged with drink driving.
In sports, England coach Gareth Southgate is happy to keep his captaincy options open.
On Sports Extra now, cricket, live commentary on the Women's Super League semi-final. And don't forget bbc.co.uk/Widdertainment for everything about the show, plus Mark's latest uncut blog, which this week is all about
remembering Toby Hooper.
This is BBC 5 Live.
With the 5 Live news at 2 o'clock, I'm Rachel Bland. Wayne Rooney has been charged with drink driving after being stopped by police early this morning. The Cheshire Force say he was arrested in Wilmslow. The 31-year-old Everton striker has been released on bail and is due to appear before Stockport magistrates on the 18th of September. A man's been jailed for 6 years for trying to steal Andy Carroll's £22,000 watch as he was driving home from training. 22-year-old Jack O'Brien pulled up alongside the striker on a motorbike and told him to hand it over. He's also been sentenced to a further 5 years for a string of other offences. Our reporter Lisa Hampley is at Basildon Crown Court.
Andy Carroll was chased and he smashed into 10 cars. He was on the wrong side of the road, and we heard in the impact statement that he now has to have security guards to pick him up and take him back from the ground, and that he thought that the motorcyclist had a gun. He was scared for his life.
A murder investigation's been launched after a baby's body was found in a park in Aldershot. The girl, who's been named Baby M, was discovered in bushes in Manor Park in May. Hampshire Police says it's still working to try and find her mother. A managing director at G4S has told 5 Live the alleged actions of 9 members of staff at an immigration removal centre are disgraceful and unacceptable. The officers have been suspended after Panorama secretly filmed them abusing and assaulting detainees. Jerry Petherick is from G4S.
A small number of staff might not have lived up to those expectations. That is what the investigations will prove or disprove. And I would like to have seen the footage already so that I could have taken any further actions that are necessary.
A leading surgeon says people need to accept that clinical obesity is a disease and not something easily fixed through diet and exercise. A group of specialists are calling for thousands more stomach shrinking operations to be offered in Britain to improve health and save the NHS money. Former World Snooker champion Shaun Murphy has told 5 Live attitudes need to change.
A couple of years ago, I lost in the final of the World Championship. That was difficult enough to take on its own. But the comments on social media about, oh, you look terrible in that suit, you need to lose weight, you lost that match because you're fat. I didn't leave the house for nearly 2 weeks. It was really detrimental to my own mental well-being.
Kenya's Supreme Court has annulled the result of last month's presidential election. It cited irregularities and ordered a new vote within 60 days. The country's president, Uhuru Kenyatta, says he disagrees with the ruling but will respect the decision. An X-ray machine, which cost more than £1 billion to build, has opened in the German city of Hamburg. It's so powerful it can study the structure of matter atom by atom. Our science correspondent Jonathan Amos says it's about the speed it flashes.
They're so fast, the frame rate is so high, that you can actually catch those proteins or catalysts in the very moment of change. You can even make a movie of that change. And that opens new routes to understanding the causes of disease.
That's the 5 Live News. The Sport Now, here's Hugh Ferris.
Thank you. Gareth Southgate says he is keen to keep sharing the leadership in the England team as they prepare for their first match since Wayne Rooney's international retirement. He's waited to name a captain for tonight's World Cup qualifier in Malta, with 4 other players having also worn the England armband in Southgate's 8 matches in charge. That match live on 5 Live Sport tonight. It all gets underway at 7 o'clock, while Chris Coleman says he wouldn't be bothered if Wales had to beat Brazil, Spain and Germany to qualify for Russia, claiming they can win their last 4 matches to reach the finals. They start with Austria tomorrow. Manchester City will play Austrian side St. Pölten in the last 32 of the Women's Champions League. Chelsea have been drawn against Bayern Munich, while Glasgow City will take on Bir Kazigurt of Kazakhstan. Those ties will be played in October. Steve Brown has been named as the new chief executive of the RFU. He's been promoted to replace Ian Ritchie, who's retiring. And Valtteri Bottas, currently fastest in second practice ahead of the Italian Grand Prix, ahead of his Mercedes teammate Lewis Hamilton. You can follow the final half an hour or so of the session from Monza on the BBC Sport website.
This is BBC 5 Live on digital, online, smartphone and tablet.
The weather, a few showers this afternoon in southeast Scotland and down the eastern side of England, but otherwise dry with sunny spells and temperatures up to around 16 to 21 degrees. It'll be another chilly night, but plenty of dry and sunny weather on Saturday with just the odd shower. Travel news, stop-start on the M62 westbound in West Yorkshire. One lane still closed after an earlier accident, 23 to 22. That's Huddersfield to Rushworth Moor. Warwickshire M42 northbound is queuing 8 to 9. The M6 to Coleshill. 2 lanes are closed after an accident and also got 1 lane shut on the southbound side. Severe delays of over an hour on the M5 northbound between junctions 8 and 7. The M50 and Worcester. 2 lanes are closed there after an accident. The queues go back to junction 10. Delays of an hour and a half on the M11 southbound in Essex. It's because of a lorry that was having a tyre changed earlier between junction 9, Saffron Walden, and 8, Stansted Airport. All lanes have now reopened there. And long delays on the M5 northbound in Devon because of holiday traffic on the move. It's stop-start between junction 27 for Tiverton through to 20 at Clevedon.
F1, the Belgian Grand Prix.
Onto the brakes now, into the right, into the left. Lewis Hamilton emerges over the crest of the hill towards the checker flag. He wins the 2017 Belgian Grand Prix under pressure from Vettel throughout the race, but he holds off the championship leader. The gap was 14 points, but victory for Hamilton means it's down to 7.
Next, the Italian Grand Prix. Live race commentary from 1 p.m. on Sunday.
F1 on 5 Live.
On digital, online, smartphone and tablet. This is 5 Live, Kermode and Mayo's film review.
Text 85058. Text will be charged at your standard message rate.
This is BBC 5 Live.
It's exactly 7 minutes past 2. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the programme discussing movies between now and 4 o'clock. All right, Mark, how's it going?
I'm very good. How are you?
I don't know.
I was just looking at the webcam and looking at you looking all lonely.
This is the traditional early
by myself.
September edition of Entertainment, whereby it's a treat for webcam viewers because it is just me in an empty studio.
But you haven't got. Usually, you put something in my place to sort. You put the cutout of Alfred Hitchcock once. You put a sack of potatoes once.
Today we're going to put Daniel Mays in there because he's going to talk about Limehouse Golem and he's going to sit in your seat. And
Limehouse what? Did you say Golem or Golem?
I said Golem.
I think you said Golem. I think you said Golem, and I think you meant Golem.
I think you're a lunatic. Anyway, so Daniel's going to be sitting in your seat, and then we're going to be doing that after around about 2:30. So then that will be a real treat.
Since he's in the building already, could you get Daniel Mays to sit in the seat and sort of enact me? I can do the talking, and he can do the, because he's a brilliant physical actor. He can do the gestures.
Anyway, on with the show. So why aren't you here? Remind me. I can't remember.
Because, Simon, it's that time of year when it's the Shetland Screenplay Film Festival, which, as you know, I co-curate and have been doing so for over a decade. And so for almost as long as this show has been going, this time of year, I'm always in Shetland. And you always ask me where I am, and I explain that I'm in Shetland. And it's a fantastic
It's because we have new listeners arriving by the shed all the time, and they just need to know.
New listeners arriving by the shed?
By the shed load.
You said by the shed. New listeners assemble over there by the shed.
It's a strange thing, really, shed load, because a shed doesn't have many listeners in it.
That's right. It's very small.
How many listeners could you get in a shed? 12, I would think.
Yeah. Well, we have more, yes.
And they wouldn't be very comfortable either.
So let me tell you some top facts about the Shetland Screenplay Festival.
And this is a big shed.
It's very good. And in